Hey everybody, it's your man, the Muscle Motivator. It is Friday, and you know what that means. It's time for another episode of No Label Live, the show where we talk about what it means to let no label define you. Because I don't know what your labels have been, I don't know what they currently are, but I know that we all have labels. And I know that you have the power to choose the labels you want defining who you are and who you want to be. This week, I'm super excited to have on a female voice that I came across through Instagram, and to watch how she's able to make an impact in the world, specifically when it comes to talking about CP, talking about the impact it has on her life, and to show up authentically as herself and just watch the impact she's been able to have on young people with CP, and the impact I see with parents commenting about what she's got going on is amazing. And this person is Kaitlin, Creation by Kittles, or Creations. If I mess that up, I'm sorry. But we'll link that in the comments below. And so, Kaitlin, it's great to have you on the show. What would you like to say to our audience here that don't know who you are?
Hi, I just want to say, first off, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. It means a lot that, you want to hear my side of the story, and I think it's great that you want to hear a female side of, life with CP. But I guess I want to start out by, explaining my story a little bit. I am 28 years old, and I have left hemicerebral palsy, which means that my CP affects my left side. So my family found out around 6 months when I was diagnosed. I wasn't really using my left side to crawl and whatnot. And, I guess one thing is growing up, I have two sisters. I have a twin sister, and I have a sister that's about 2 years older. And my parents never wanted me to feel differently. So if my sisters were playing sports, I was out there playing sports. And I think, growing up, that is one thing that, has really helped me physically and mentally is playing sports and whatnot, because, you learn a lot from sports. But I guess the reason why I started Creations by Kittles is because my parents focused on making sure I was able to walk and walk well. So when I was younger, they focused a lot on physical therapy and not so much on occupational therapy. And I think, when I was younger, using two hands was really hard for me. So when I would do occupational therapy, I kind of would make it look like I was using two hands so that I didn't have to do the therapy. In my young head, I thought to myself, okay, how do I make it look like when they say use two hands? Because, if I had $1 for every time my parents said use two hands, I never would have to work a day in my life. It's just one of those things where, over time it became like learn non-use. So, I just think that, throughout, grade school, high school, and a little bit in college, I did play sports, but I just tried to hide behind the problems that I had with my left hand, and tried to, feel like I was everybody, just like everyone else, when, that's not the case, because everyone, is different. So when I was in college, I played soccer for my freshman year of college, but then I had, gotten an injury, so I had to, scale back on that. And then I kind of wasn't as active as I had been throughout, my childhood and teenage years after that. And I started having some really bad spasticity that I, hadn't remember feeling for years. And just, it was hard for me to walk. I was tripping a lot. And I went to my PCP and said, hey, there's something has to give here. I can't be doing this. I'm struggling a lot and I just need some assistance. And because I think whenever you turn 18, I think at that time I was 26, but when you turn 18, they kind of tell you, your CP doctor, you deal a lot at Children's Hospital, and they kind of say, oh, well, kind of good luck. They kind of say goodbye to you. So, I mean, I think that that's something that's pretty sad now that I'm older because, I just had this, constant pain. And my PCP said, well, have you ever thought about seeing a physical medicine and rehabilitation doctor? And I said, absolutely not. Like, I've never heard of that. What is that? And he talked to me about Botox injections. And from when I was 26, or from when I was born to when I was 26, my left hand only felt comfortable in a fist or when it was barely in use. So it's one of those things where I was like, well, maybe I'll try anything to, learn something. And when I started getting Botox, I just felt so much, it makes the muscles a little bit weak, but I just felt so much stronger because I just discovered I had a left hand that I could use. So with the Botox, I was, offered physical therapy, which I completed, and also occupational therapy, which, was very, very, very hard. And, 26 years of non-learned use, I just got, as my occupational therapist said, I got very good at doing everything one-handed. Yeah. So, it's kind of one of those things where you just, you have to survive. So you just adjust yourself to, whatever you're doing. And I'm not saying that that was a good idea, but it was what I thought in my head would be a good idea. And I didn't really know that there was another way, I guess I would say.
Yeah. I'm thinking about, I think as a kid, I think we all kind of face that when we're going through therapy, and it's like, what's the most limited amount I have to do and I can get away with this?
Yes. And it's so funny because I remember maybe I was in kindergarten and I still have PTSD, I guess, from this. But, those like toys that you wind up with your fingers? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, they start moving. I still I don't like seeing those or anything like that because it was so hard for me to, do that with my left hand. And the same thing like with Velcro. I, had PTSD from this sound of ripping Velcro too, because, I hated wearing my braces and whatnot. And, shoes, I never got the cool shoes growing up, that kind of thing.
Yeah, we all wear the old people shoes to try and fit over those braces, right? So
oh my gosh, yeah.
One of my questions, going back to earlier when you were talking about sports, what do you think the most important lesson you've learned from sports is?
That's a really tough question because I think, through sports, whether it's an individual sport, let's say swimming, that was the first sport I did, or let's say a team sport like basketball. I think that, trying different sports, even if I know, having CP, I knew I wasn't always going to be the best at anything I did, but I think, you have to put effort and try because you never know what you're going to end up with or what you're going to accomplish. But I think it teaches you a little bit of self-discipline.
Mm-hmm.
And, I know from personal experience, and I know that, you lift a lot of weights and that type of stuff. And I think your dad was, a football coach, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you grew up around sports, but I think, it's just so important. Just even with CP, you're always trying, harder maybe than the person next to you. And I always said, like when it come to sports, I would try, harder than the person next to me, not to be great, but to just make the team. And I think, my dad, growing up always talked about muscle memory. And I think sometimes like learning to walk or, playing sports, your muscles have to learn, how to work. And I think the more active you are when you have limitations like that, within reason, I think that it's really good because, I actually just got back into, a workout routine for the first time in a couple of years. And my spasticity feels great. Like I don't have that many issues as much as I had in the past. And I think that that's something that is not talked a lot about because I feel like a lot of times people just consider CP to be a childhood thing, but they don't realize that, children grow up and that's, that leads to, more issues and whatnot of, I feel like I'm an 85-year-old grandma sometimes when it snows, my muscles, hurt or whatnot.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things where, like I said, when you turn 18, they kind of just say, bye-bye, see you later. And I know that's a roundabout answer to your question about sports, but I think it just teaches you a lot of self-discipline. And I think sports teach you that you need to stand up for yourself. And I think that that's one of the best lessons you can learn because the whole, they forget about you when you turn 18. That's something that I've been struggling with a lot lately, for different types of assistance, such as the assistance I'm trying to receive in driving modifications and whatnot. So if you don't stand up for yourself, when you're younger, your parents stand up for you, but at some point you need to be able to take over and say, this is my fight and I have to keep fighting because a lot of this stuff is a long, drawn-out process of, doctor's visits and getting approvals of this, that, and the other thing. So you have to be your own self-advocate, and I think that that's what sports teaches you.
Yeah, okay. And so what's one step, if I'm a young person, what's another step other than sports that you would say if you are looking to take your first step in becoming a self-advocate, what advice would you give a younger person?
Okay, you skipped out a little bit, but I think the question was, what advice would I give to a younger person about being a self-advocate?
Yeah, like taking your first step in becoming a self-advocate.
I think, at a certain age, you have to be able to kind of understand a lot about CP. And I think, and be open and honest about, to your doctor about how you feel. I know I see, a lot of times I see a meme frequently that it's not about CP, but it's just in general, like, you get to a certain point where you have to call your doctors and make your own appointments on your own, and your mom doesn't do that. That's being an adult. But I think it's just important to, make sure that, you are, expressing how different things make you feel and what you want to see yourself do in the future, and not just necessarily, at a young age, what your parents want to see. I think, obviously your parents' opinions matter, but I think that if you're, if you communicate well with your parents and your doctors, that's the best step I could have at any age.
Gotcha. So that communication is key, and realizing that at some point, like you said, you have to stand up for yourself because it's your body and nobody's going to know how you're actually feeling. other than you.
Correct. Yeah.
And I like the idea of the self-expression, right? So and I feel like from what I've seen from your Instagram creation, your Instagram is all about your self-expression. So how did you get into your painting that you do?
Okay. Well, so when I was talking about, I started occupational therapy for the first time in a really long time when I turned 26. And this was something that was extremely stressful and just, I had a lot of rough days at the beginning. And I had an occupational therapist say to me, okay, so you have to think about it like this. Your right hand is 28 years old, but your left hand is basically in kindergarten. So why don't you, do some like kindergarten style games or crafts to help make your mind not think about how hard it is. And, you're just bringing it back to the basics. And I thought that was really interesting. So I started playing like Connect Four. I think I played like Operation, like Don't Spill the Beans. I played with marbles. And that led me to painting and making crafts. I do make some crafts. I make some bracelets, but that's been getting harder and harder because sometimes I'll get to the end of the bracelet and all the beads fall on the floor, and then I get real upset with myself. But and I've always been a person that loves quotes and positive reinforcements because my parents wanted me to be able, I guess, wanted me to believe in myself, and no matter what, they always believed in me. So I think I also write out quotes on my paintings, some of them with motivational quotes I see with Sharpie for my left hand. And it's so funny because I think having CP, from my personal experience, I always want to try my very best. And I think that, I never really liked art because I thought it was kind of a waste of time because I've always wanted to do things as fast as possible because sometimes my CP made me a little bit slower than others. So I think that, this arts are finding and painting arts gave me a new appreciation for arts because even if I made a few mistakes while I was painting or writing, at least, I was trying and I was using my left hand, which is more than I've done my whole life. And it's, become a way to keep up with therapy because even though I have CP, with my insurance, I'm only allowed 25 visits a year with CP. So I, send out paintings and give them away for free. I know people think I charge for them, but I don't because, it's helping me. It's less expensive than occupational therapy copays. And if someone can relate to my story, that means the world to me because, I think everybody struggles, and I just think that we can learn a lot from other people's struggles. And, before I created this, I kind of wanted to create the Creations by Kittles Instagram account just to hold myself accountable. And it's like a thank you for supporting me because, without that support, I might have stopped occupational therapy. But this is the longest I've ever gone, continually using my left hand. And this therapy has helped me so much because I'll catch myself using my left hand to like turn on the lights or picking up a glass. And I'm like, wait, whoa, who's doing that? And it's like lefty's doing that, which is lefty's what I call my CP. So I think, there's just so much you can learn from other people. And even meeting you via Instagram, I've met so many people via Instagram that, I really feel that I connect with. And, up until recently, I never knew anybody I never met anyone that had a similar CP situation than me. And I think that it's so cool because when you're having those off days, sometimes like I said before I created this Instagram account, I wasn't really honest with my feelings. And, you know, I would just say I was tired, but I would never tell people necessarily why I was tired, because I didn't want people to feel bad for me. But there's just a communication and a friendship with people that, you know, you can connect with so much with social media. I mean, there's so many negatives about social media, but I just want to reach out to anybody, you know, that's struggling, and let them know that, you know, you're not alone. And, you know, I just always felt so alone, you know, growing up, because I didn't really know anybody with CP, and I didn't know anyone had the same struggles as me. I just always felt a little bit different or a little bit off.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew I had CP, but, you know, talking to some other people, it makes, you know, a lot of sense. Like, I get scared so easily. I'm just so jumpy. And I learned through somebody on Instagram that that's a CP thing. We just get caught off guard, and we, you know, we don't have a lot of control over our bodies. And I think I was so happy to learn that, because, you know, sometimes you just can't control what your body wants to do. You want to do something, but your body has other things in mind.
Oh yeah, that's why I don't go to the movies a lot, because of that reflex. Because those loud volumes, they just make me jump for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, absolutely. And so, man, this is going by pretty fast here. What's something that you wish people would ask you about that they don't, not a lot of people talk to you about?
You know, this is another tough question. You're throwing out so many tough questions, but I'm just trying to, you know, answer this the best way that I know. And I think that one thing with my case of CP, there's a lot of times now that I'm so open about it, that there's people that I've known for years that didn't realize I had CP, but I mean, I'm sure that they realized there was something a little bit off with, you know, the way I walk or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, you know, I think I don't know if this answers your question, but one thing is people, when I say I have CP, they're like, but you're fine. And I think that kind of bothers me, because, I wish people wouldn't say that, not what I wish they would ask me. I just wish people wouldn't say that, because I think that, you know, people don't realize, you know, I think everybody with CP has a high tolerance for pain, because I think that throughout the day, you know, we usually have a lot of pain throughout the day. Mm-hmm. So I think that, you know, we just have had no choice but to be strong. That when people say, oh no, you're fine, there's nothing wrong with you, that's kind of hurtful in a way, because they don't realize how hard you've had to work to look fine, I guess I would say.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's spot on. And I think one of the other things that makes me think of is people don't necessarily realize that cerebral palsy is actually a brain injury.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, go ahead.
That to me is just really hard, because it affects so many things that you don't think about. And, you know, I'll speak, you know, I think that CP, you know, gives you a lot of things that, you know, people are like, well, it's your hand or your leg. But people don't understand, you know, like in, you know, college, I use adaptive equipment. I use, you know, a text-to-speech software, because, you know, learning's a little bit harder for me. I did, you know, grow up with some learning disabilities, or, you know, I think people don't talk about this a lot, but I think that CP really gives you anxiety. And I just think that that's something that's not really discussed a lot. And I think, you know, as a society, we're always anxious. Most people are anxious, but I think CP forces you to, you know, overthink everything. I always say I overthink about overthinking. And it's like you have to tell your brain so much, like all the time. Like people don't understand how hard it is to do some sort of movements that you want, like your CP, affected area to do, and you can't really do that. And then that makes you sad, and then you're anxious. Like I know, for instance, this is something that always gave me anxiety. Just a side story. Whenever I would go on a date with somebody, I was nervous. I didn't want to look a certain way or do a certain thing. And cutting food is really hard for me. And it wasn't until I got a special knife that I was able to cut. So if I was going on a date with somebody that, first time date, I would like look up the menu and see what I could order, that I didn't have to cut. And like my worst fear was the one time I love pizza. So the guy I was going on a date with knew I loved pizza. So he ordered a pizza and he was like, you can have the first slice. And I'm like, he was just being a gentleman. And I'm like, oh no, that's okay. Why don't you cut it? It's just like, and then something like that gives you anxiety. And then I think that, being, somewhat different or thinking that you're different than everyone leads you into, did they just stare at me the whole time? Do they see my CP? And sometimes they're not even focused on that. But that's why I think CP gives you anxiety. And I think people don't talk about that enough.
Man, yeah, I love the fact that sharing that story talks about how I think most people are forced to think differently, and a lot of times decisions are made on being more practical than some of our peers, like the idea of cutting food and being as prepared as possible to work around whatever the physical limitations are. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then what happens is you freak yourself out because never did I see that we were going to split a pizza. You know what I mean? And then it's like, well, now I'm even more anxious. So when I get up and walk to the bathroom, am I going to doctor walk it? And I guess for those people that don't know what doctor walk is, somebody's watching you, so you like are on your best behavior. I would walk to the bathroom and go heel toe in my head, just because I didn't want that to be something, that people focus on, because I have a lot of, to offer outside of having CP. So, it's just one of those things where, sometimes you want people to know about your CP, and sometimes you just want to be your own individual without CP.
Yeah. So, real quickly here, what would you say, like, forgetting CP, who is Kaitlin outside of her cerebral palsy?
I would say that, I am a positive, outgoing, sarcastic, just hardworking person. If that makes sense.
Statement, yeah. Absolutely. I've got a couple more questions.
Okay.
Where can people connect with you?
Okay. Well, you can connect with me on Instagram. My Instagram name is Creations with a K by Kittles. So you can just look for me there, or you can search the hashtag Creations by Kittles, because usually when I post, I, use that hashtag.
Okay. Yep. Everybody, and I'll drop that in the comments below. And so before I ask my final question, this has to do with, if you were talking to your younger self, like if you were looking in a mirror and you were talking to your younger self, what would you tell her about what she's capable of doing?
I think That's a really interesting question. I've actually thought about that a lot recently. And, I think there's a couple things I would say, but I'll try to keep it brief because I know we're short on time. But the one thing is, be yourself. Don't worry so much about, what other people think about you. Just try your best. And, if you believe in yourself, it doesn't matter what other people think, because the most important relationship you have is the one you have with yourself. And any relationship after that is a bonus. You're a whole person on your own. And, use that left hand, use it, because, you just never know what you're capable of as long as you never give up.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I know a lot of people are going to relate to that for sure. And then the final question I have is, what does no label defines me mean to you?
I would say that it means, people put limitations on you by using a label. And I think you need to, forget about that and just realize, work hard, try your best, and you never know what you're capable of. And it's awesome to, show yourself that you can do anything.
Awesome. Yeah, you are capable of doing anything. So if you're watching that, know that is true. It just might take a little different path to get there, and it's definitely going to take work, but you are capable of doing anything. Is there anything else you would like to share with the audience before we end today?
Well, I guess I want to ask, is there anything that you want to know that you haven't asked me?
Oh, that's a good question. So there is, I think that this is going to dovetail into coming on again at a different time, but I think it's worth maybe starting the conversation here and seeing what might open up as people talk to you outside of the show. But and it's a big question, but it's been on my mind, and that's what being a woman, and you've already talked about dating a little bit, but being a woman and living with cerebral palsy, what is the biggest barrier that you faced when dating? That's what's been on my mind for a lot of the interview.
I would say, just worrying. I think a lot of times in, past relationships or even just dating in general, you just, worry when you talk about, having a disability. You hope that the person that you're with is supportive and, will be there for you, because, you can stand up on your own. But if you don't have the support and understanding from a person, then they don't deserve you, and you have so much more to give. That if they don't see that, that's their problem.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice for people to keep in mind. And I know that there's a lot more that goes on in that aspect of life. And I know relationships is a big thing that I don't think people with disabilities talk about a lot. So I know there's a lot there. And I think, like I said, I know that people are going to get value from the show, and I see this being more than just this one interview. I want to thank you for coming on and sharing everything that you have today. If you guys have gained any value from this, which I know you have, make sure and go and follow Kaitlin on Instagram. Make sure and give a like and a share so that as many people as possible can see this interview. And let me know what you liked most about the interview and what kind of questions do you have after listening and watching our interview together. And remember, if you're watching this, you're probably up to something big. And when you're up to something big, you have to be patient, you have to be diligent, and you must never, never quit, because no label defines you. Your label should always, always empower you. And you guys can come back next Friday, 7 p.m., and same channel, same station. So can't wait to see you guys again next week. Thanks so much, Kaitlin, for joining us today.
Thank you so much. I really loved being on your podcast, and I hope, everyone watching it or listening gets something out of it.